The sooner you watch this, the better. A quiet problem has been brewing underneath for decades that's now become too big to ignore, and that's a whole generation of young men in society that are falling way behind in every way. Watch Chris Williamson speak the hard truth to Joe Rogan for just how bad it has become, because I think it signals a much deeper problem that we need to talk about.
It's interesting to think about you mentioned earlier on about going to the gym is right wing and liking fast cars is right wing and all the rest of it. The number of liberal women that are struggling, I think, to find an eligible partner is going up because they just can't find a guy that'll hold the door open for them, that'll treat them like a lady, that'll try and be the protector, provider, procreator thing. You go, you're talking about a conservative. You're talking about somebody who's more traditional in that way. And I get worried, I sort of talk a lot about this stuff on the show, and I get worried about not helping men to improve in this sort of zero-sum view of empathy, that if you give some attention to men and the way that they're struggling, that it takes it away from some other more deserving group. So a lot of the time, if someone's falling behind, 50 years ago, Title IX gets introduced, right, for women. There's not enough women in higher education. There's not enough women expediting them through socioeconomic status. 50 years later, they've blown the roof off the glass ceiling. It doesn't exist. 2 women for every 1 man completing a 4-year US college degree by 2030. Women earn way more than men do in their 20s. Way more. And now, it's going to be difficult for you to find an eligible partner as you begin to climb up your own socioeconomic ladder. As you get higher and higher up, you look across and there are fewer and fewer men over there. And what you think is, okay, well, typically, if a group is falling behind in society, we don't tell them to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. We spend billions of money in taxpayer-funded charities and think tanks to try and work out what's going on and to try and bring them along for the ride. That's not happening with men because vestigially for so long, men had it so good. Yeah. And now it feels like twisting the knife in some sort of karmic retribution in a way. Like this is penance. That you're paying.
And that's what is unique about the boy crisis, as someone like Warren Farrell calls it. Unlike past movements for disenfranchised minority groups, there's no larger society or group that men call out for the rescue. And especially not when third-wave feminism over the last 50 years has made them the punching bag for so many of society's ills as the white male patriarchy and toxic masculinity. By the way, we're having some really important conversations every day here at Millionaire Mentor, so please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to never miss out. Now, while society's been fixated over the last 5 decades at uplifting women, and rightfully so, the last 10 years of these movements turning more bitter and woke in vilifying men has started to do something very damaging, I'd say, which is chipping away at what masculinity even is to try and destroy the patriarchy. That's what you see with things like this infamous article that calls men out to stop working out because that physical strength supposedly creates a cycle of toxic behavior. And yet at the time when a majority of men are out of shape, their mental weakness is just downstream from physical decay.
Mental strength or physical strength?
Physical strength. Mental strength is downstream from it.
See, I think mental first. I think mental strength is the #1 issue in the world right now. I think we need to make our young people mentally stronger. They're all gym bunnies.
I don't disagree.
They're all gym bunnies. They're all piling the weights on, but they don't have it up here.
I think that most people are neither. I think that most people have atrophied physically and mentally. And I think that the easiest change that you can do, trying to think your way out of overthinking is like trying to sniff your way out of a cocaine addiction. And you can't really change the mind with the mind. You have to change it with the body first. So going for a walk will do way more for your mood than sitting and thinking about and vacillating about whatever's dealing with you. If I had the choice between a good night's sleep or a hard training session, I would go to the gym because the difference in my mood before and after the gym is way more than before and after a night's sleep. So I don't disagree. The two work simpatico together. But for me, if you do not have a physical practice of some kind and you're struggling with mental health, you need to look at the physical side before you look at the mental side. That is the foundation. That's the raw materials of what your mentality is going to grow out of.
And then even other aspects of a traditionally masculine man chipped away, resulting in stats like this, and that reveal nearly half of all men have never even approached a woman romantically in real life. other than just swiping away at a screen. And that entire attempt to tame masculinity is downstream from one conflation that modern society refuses to recognize, and it's that there has always only been a tiny minority of men at the top of the socioeconomic hierarchy, while most men along with women suffered under those systems, and that's a reality that is as true of the agricultural age over the past 10,000 years, when 90% of serfs and peasants tilling the land couldn't dream of being rich landowners, as it is the modern industrial age when society looks at the 5 or 10% of men as CEOs or at the top of large corporations.
You can look at the number of CEOs, and sure, guys that outperform on the top end, yep. But that's not necessarily due to privilege. It's because putting yourself in that position to do what you need to do to get yourself to the position of being a founder, being a CEO, running a successful company is so insane that most women would just choose to not go and do that. You're talking about outliers. Evolutionary psychology says that men are nature's playthings, that there's more variability. There's more male geniuses, but there's also more male retards. And it's all well and good pointing to the number of CEOs and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all the rest of it. That doesn't help the guy who is really struggling and has had that run of bad luck and has been really struggling, trying to work on himself. And if women have a problem, a lot of the time we say, what can we do to fix society? Any other group. But if men are struggling, we say, what is it that men are doing where they can't fix themselves?
Yeah.
And in some ways that's inspiring. Like, guys want that sense of like, I can do this, I can do this. But it denies that there's structural problems. I think the education system for young boys is really, really tough, getting them to sit in a classroom for 6 hours a day. It seems like females are just better at doing that. Young girls are more effective at a sort of brain-based economy, highlighting and planning ahead of the homework that they've got to do and the assignments and stuff like that. And you just roll that forward.
That's just a duality of the male world. There's more men at the top, just as there's more men at the bottom of the social ladder. Think of some of the most important infrastructural jobs that we don't even think about, but are absolutely critical to society's function. They're almost 90% represented by men. Think of offshore oil drillers, cave miners, electricity grid repairmen, and construction laborers that never get mentioned by the modern left when it talks about gender inequality or decries the patriarchy. That's a mindset that permeates further than you'd imagine. Here's a post from the United Nations that caused quite a bit of a backlash a few years ago when the UN put out this message for International Men's Day, saying, quote, "Happy International Men's Day to all the male allies around the world who support women, defy gender roles, fight gender-based violence, and stand up for equality." That reminds me of something Hillary Clinton once said, quote, "Women have always been the primary victims of war. Women lose their husbands, their fathers, their sons in combat." That's just a snapshot of a whole society that forgot about men's slow decline over the past few decades.
I'm not saying, let's rip women out of the classroom and out of the boardroom and put them back into the kitchen. Like, obviously not. Obviously, that's not what either of us are saying.
Well, what do you think is the cause of it? Like, what do you think is the reason why more men aren't succeeding and getting college degrees and more men aren't going out and making as much money in their 20s?
I think that the current environment does not necessarily lend itself to the disposition that men have got. So they're less conscientious than women from a personality standpoint on average. That means that it's really difficult, comparatively, on average, for you to be able to remind yourself that you need to do the sort of homework. Men are more predisposed to addiction. They're more predisposed to using recreational drugs. They're more predisposed to being in jail, to all of the sort of gang stuff that people get drawn into. It's just more likely for guys. There are more routes that men can be pulled away in that sort of a manner. And on top of it, I don't think that there is a particularly inspiring vision for what men is. But you said earlier on about fitness right wing, fast cars right wing. There was this thread on Reddit, I think in a left-leaning forum, that said, people of the left, can you give me a good example of who you think a positive male role model would be? And the top voted one was Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
What about Fabio?
You've had to go to a fantasy land in order to be able to find somebody who's sufficiently pure.
Precisely. There has to be a point where society tries to meet men where they are, unlike the modern left-wing social constructionists who think that they can just melt down masculinity into a pot and rebuild it the way they believe a man should be. That's not going to happen unless we finally start having this conversation. So tell me in the comments what you think about this societal shift, because we might be standing at a crossroads in this century where men at large either fall off further or truly find the strength to get back on their feet.